A strange morning. Imagine waking up and discovering you're not yourself. That's our opening image. Gregor Samsa, a traveling salesman, wakes one morning to find he has transformed into a large, insect-like creature. Not a dramatic fantasy moment. It's odd, mundane, and terrifying all at once. He's worried about missing work, about money, about the small practical things of life, and those worries land like heavy stones in this surreal scene. The first shock, body and job. Right away, Kafka shows us the collision between inner life and outside demands. Gregor's first thoughts aren't philosophical, they're painfully practical. He thinks about how to get to work, how his boss will react, how he'll keep the family afloat. You can picture it. A man whose whole identity has been built around his job, and the job doesn't care that he woke up trapped in an unfamiliar body. It's like wearing a suit of armor that's suddenly fused to you, useful once, now suffocating. The family behind the door. Gregor doesn't live alone. His family, his father, his mother, and his younger sister Greta depend on him. At first, there's confusion and concern. Greta brings him food and clears his room. She's tender, almost maternal. Their home becomes two worlds, the world inside Gregor's locked room and the world outside that door, where life goes on with its bills, visitors, and chores. That door, physically simple, becomes a powerful symbol, the boundary between being seen and being hidden. The slow narrowing from care to rejection. As days pass, the family's reaction shifts. At first, there's sympathy. But sympathy is fragile when it collides with fear, shame, and economic pressure. The father, who had once relied on Gregor, grows angry and violent. The mother oscillates between fainting and trying to be brave. Greta, who initially cares for Gregor, begins to change too. She grows tired, resentful, and eventually distant. It's painfully human. People's compassion often erodes when a situation stretches them beyond their limits. The house as society, guests and lodgers. Kafka widens the scene. To survive financially, the family takes in lodgers. Their presence turns the Samsa apartment into a small society with rules and expectations. The lodgers are polite but shallow. Their respectability depends on appearances. Gregor, once the primary earner, becomes a source of shame. He's no longer part of the social machinery. He's hidden, and the family's concern increasingly centers on maintaining outward normalcy rather than understanding him. Moments that hurt. The violin and the apple. There are scenes that cut close to home. Greta plays the violin one evening, and it awakens in Gregor something, a fragile hope that music might reconnect him to his family. But when he emerges, drawn to that sound, the family reacts with horror. The lodgers are outraged. The father throws an apple at Gregor, embedding it in his back. That apple becomes a small, ugly wound that festers. It's Kafka's way of showing how small acts of violence leave deep marks, a physical injury that represents emotional rejection. Isolation and inner life. Much of the story is spent in quiet, interior moments. Gregor's thoughts are often banal, sometimes gentle. He misses human touch and routine, and he clings to memories, a picture on his wall, the sound of music, the smell of the room. Yet the world outside shrinks. He becomes less capable of communicating, and the family gradually retreats from trying. The reader feels both pity and an uncomfortable recognition. How easily we isolate people who become other. The final turn, exhaustion and relief. In the end, Gregor quietly succumbs. His death is almost anticlimactic, a tired, lonely passing that the family discovers with a mixture of relief and sorrow. The Samsas, suddenly unburdened, start to imagine a brighter future. They move, talk about marriage for Greta, and breathe as if a weight has been lifted. That reaction is the sting of the story. The family's life improves when Gregor disappears. The man who sacrificed himself becomes invisible in death, and his absence becomes a kind of social rebirth. Themes made simple. What the metamorphosis means. So, what is Kafka asking us? One way to hear it is, the story is about alienation. Gregor is physically transformed, but the deeper transformation is social. He's stripped of the role that made him valuable. The book asks, how much of our humanity is tied to usefulness? How quickly do relationships fray when someone can't play their assigned part? Another theme is the cruelty of everyday life. The family's shift from care to cold practicality shows how economic pressure and social appearance can erode empathy. The lodger's offended looks, the father's violence, Greta's change, these are small, believable acts that add up to a tragedy. Finally, think about identity and selfhood. Gregor's inner life, his memories, his sensations, his small acts of longing, remains deeply human. Kafka forces us to look at what it means to be human when the body, or the role, betrays you. A few metaphors to keep in mind. Picture Gregor as a clock that keeps ticking even when the house no longer wants to listen, reliable, useful, and then discarded when it no longer fits the room. Or imagine a costume that becomes your skin. You may have worn it willingly for years, but when it won't come off, it reveals how much of you was shaped by others' expectations. Wrap up. What to carry home. At its heart, The Metamorphosis is a quiet, sharp story about how people treat each other under pressure. It asks you to notice the small cruelties, a withheld glance, a slammed door, a half-hearted attempt at care. It reminds us that dignity doesn't come from usefulness alone, and that compassion is the hard work we owe one another, especially when someone changes, breaks down, or no longer fits. So, when you finish the tale, sit with this question. How would I act if a person I depended on suddenly became different? That's the test Kafka sets, and it's still uncomfortably relevant.